everybody. It is gathering room time again. November 11th, 11/11. That might be a significant date to those of you who are into numerology. I wouldn't know. You can talk about it betwixt yourselves if you want. As far as I know, I am alone. No, it's one person in the gathering room, 7 persons. How are you doing? Oh, and Bilbo the dog just came to join me. Oh, hello, all of you. Hello, Ashley. Whoa, I get it. Now I am, look at this. Wendy from New Zealand. I am doing this myself because Ro, who is always so great at facilitating this, is in a cab in New York City going to do something fun. Woo! Someone came from Denmark. Hello, Kelly. So you guys are going to have to bear with me because I have the Farsighteds. So I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to be running the board. Hello from Ohio. Yay. And Hawaii. Yes. From Kona. I know a dog named Kona. Oh, somebody says hello to Bilbo. Bilbo, somebody says hello to you. He's just eating Kleenex. He doesn't care. Well, he's shredding Kleenex. From Melbourne, yay! And howdy from Victoria. This is awesome. I'm having such a good time. Oh, how do I get to the number of people? Ooh, there is exactly 100. Hello, we're gonna do this now. Okay, wait, I have to stop showing it. Oh, Lord. I think Laurie's comment from Victoria is just going to stay up. Oh, wait, hide current comment. Okay, I'm good. We really were going to do this together. Ro was going to be in a B&B in New York, and I was going to be here in Pennsylvania, but there's a lot of traffic, apparently, in this place called New York City. I don't know if you have heard of it. It's very she, I understand. So there she is on the street. Anyway, we've got a bunch of peoples here, and we are going to do the gathering room, just you and me and Ro in a cab. So thank you, everybody, for being here. This week, I got an email from a friend that said she was entering a time of grieving. And she was very wise, and she said, I know how to grieve, and I know that it's good and all that, but it sure comes wrapped in a lot of agony. And she wasn't asking for anything, but I thought, I'd like to talk about that. I went to a story slam in New York. There's a thing called The Moth that is just storytelling, and I went to it last week. And there were 5 stories, and like 3 of them were very sad. And yet the audience was spellbound and everybody loved it, and their stories worth telling. And I had a lunch guest yesterday. We were trading book ideas, and I told him to read Cold Mountain by Charles Fraser, which you should totally read. It's a masterpiece. And I was going on, and then I said, but it's depressing as hell. And he said, oh, I love depressing books. Sorry, I have something written on my hand. He said, I love depressing books. There's something very cleansing about them. And I said, yeah, this is interesting. The topic of grief and grieving is coming up big time, and it's kind of basic. It's a basic thing we all have to deal with, but it is a really interesting thing to discuss. Because most of us, I would guess all of us, know what it feels like. But our general way of dealing with it is to avoid it at all costs. And when we feel it, to either pretend we're not feeling it, to try to get past it, hide it from other people. We have a variety of reactions to grief, none of which are really that functional. And the reason is we don't stop and figure out, what is this for? Like, I know how it feels, but what is the process of grief? Why is it happening to me? There are a lot of people who say, why me? Why is this happening to me? But it's more, why do I have to have grief? I want somebody else to have grief, not me. I like to say when I'm training coaches that there are 3 stages of learning to be, somebody who gives other people advice. And the first stage is, why is this happening to me? Because we all grieve and horrible things happen and we don't like it. And then if you work with that for a few decades, you get to the point where you kind of become a detective and you're like, why is this happening to me? And it's more like, maybe there's a function. It's not just pure avoidance. And then if you keep going for a couple of decades and you go in deeply to that question, why is this happening to me? You can reach a space where everything becomes a blessing and you actually can sit even in a painful space and find something so spacious and like divine in it. You can feel what it's doing to you and it's positive, and you can actually say, oh, why is this happening to me? Like, how do I deserve this kind of awe? So I'm kind of at the second one. Like, why is this happening to me? I'm not in the screaming and yelling and throwing things at the wall. I tried that when I was pregnant with Adam, my son, and he was diagnosed with Down syndrome, and I was barfing my lungs out every 10 minutes. I remember trying to curse God and die, because I heard that phrase from the Bible when I was in church as a kid. And I'm like, I really tried cursing God, and then I waited to die, and it just didn't happen. So I definitely spent my time resisting grief. But through that experience, which just continued, and many others afterward, I got to the stage of, wait, why is this happening to me? Because I found that grief is a mechanism. It's actually, when we feel sad, it is the feeling of something happening in the psyche. And in fact, if you look at it closely for a long period of time, you will find that grief is the psyche's reaction to transition, to change. So all of life involves change. Every single minute of every single day is constant change. When you get to a change that is very noticeable, like a shift in your life circumstances, it shows up as the loss of what you're used to. And that, when you have a loss of what you're used to and you interpret change as loss, the grieving process comes in to work with changing you into a person who is fit for the new circumstance. So I always like to talk about the fact that when prisoners, long-term prisoners, get out of jail, they have to go through a grieving process. They get out of prison. So if you've seen the Shawshank Redemption, it's about a guy who's wrongly imprisoned and how he tries to get out. And there's a guy in there that he meets in prison who's a longtime convict, but he actually gets out after, like, I don't know, 20 years or something. And he goes to a halfway house where he's trying to adjust to normal society. And he goes out and commits another crime to get back into prison because he can't handle the transition. It's too much. He's used to the structure of prison life. And anything we're used to, if it goes away, starts the grieving process. It's almost like, you can almost see it as a mechanical process. It feels, it has its emotional repercussions, but it's kind of a mechanical clinking and changing of the psyche. So if that man had not committed the crime, he would have entered the grieving process for the loss of his current situation. And what that would have felt like is what we've read in Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work on people who know they're dying, the grieving process. First denial, then bargaining, then anger, then sadness, and then finally acceptance. And of course, it's not so much a nice step ladder as it is a cement mixer. Like, all of that is happening all the time. That's what it feels like. And the anger, sadness parts are really painful, potentially excruciating, potentially not so excruciating. We're going to get to that in a minute. But I just wanted to reframe, instead of, oh, how sad you're going through a grieving process, just say, oh, the grieving process is what helps a prisoner who gets out of prison become a free man instead of a prisoner. Because that process of, after you get past denial and kind of after you get past bargaining, but the anger and sadness part, that destroys the old order in the psyche. It melts you down. into a sort of glob that is then free to form a new being. And it forms a new being that has the wisdom of the previous life situation, but also a more expansive worldview. So it's what they call an emergent phenomenon. So an emergent phenomenon is something that both incorporates and transcends its past self. So the atom incorporates but transcends subatomic particles. A molecule incorporates and transcends the function of an atom. A protein incorporates and transcends what molecules can do, and your body incorporates and transcends what just proteins would do lying around loose. So you're made of these things, but you're more than that as well. When you go through the grieving process, it incorporates who you used to be and then opens you into being something much bigger that also remembers being smaller. So it doesn't actually waste any of the experience you've had, but it uses it as a springboard to become something much more expansive. And, I overuse the metaphor of the caterpillar melting down in the cocoon and then reforming itself into a butterfly. That is the function of grief. So actually in the phase right after a life transition, this is Martha Beck Coaching 101. The only action implication is to limit your activities as much as you can so that you can fully experience the grieving process, because that is a full-time job if you've had a big transition. And in fact, therapists call it the healing feeling. If you go to our culture's usual process, a big transition happens, you claim it's no big deal, you feel bad underneath, but you really, really speed up or start drinking a little more or having more sex or having more parties or doing something to cover up the grief, because going into it is very painful and the psyche doesn't want to. You could also say that the ego is fixated on what the psyche already is. It doesn't want the psyche to become more, because that means that and by ego, I'm using this in the Buddhist sense, the sense of the small self. The sense of who you are has to shatter for you to become something else. I really like one metaphor, which is that the ego is like an eggshell, and it protects the body. It holds the body the way it would hold a chick inside, waiting for you to become big enough to shatter one level of ego and become a bird able to fly. So kind of like the cocoon metaphor, only different, a little bit different, because the pecking of breaking an eggshell is the soul trying to shatter the ego. And it can actually feel like you're breaking, like the self is breaking, because in fact it is. But is this a bad thing? Well, use another metaphor, very similar. Mammalian birth, the way we give birth. Something gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It becomes fully fledged. It's ready to go out into the world. And then something catastrophic happens from the point of view of the fetus, right? Everything it's always been used to goes away. And there's a very, very painful transition. And for the mother, being pregnant goes away. And there's a painful transition as she gives birth. And two separate changes happen there. One ego breaks free of being a fetus and becomes a baby, and another breaks free of being a woman who had no children or a certain number of children and becomes a woman who has more children than that. So the egos have to shift both times. Both times it's painful. And there is a period, if you've had a baby, there's a time when you are in labor that they call transition. So you're contracting away. I did this for 40 hours with my first child because I am so resistant to change. I did not want to let go and let this happen to me. I mean, conceptually, I was fine with it, but I was very, very resistant in my body. And obviously my unconscious was keeping my body rigid. So labor went on for almost 2 full days before, and it never went to the stage called transition, which is where like the body's preparing to give birth, preparing to like push the baby out. But there's a time when it shifts from I'm getting ready to push the baby out to, oh, we're pushing, right? Baby coming out, no ifs, ands, or buts. And at that point, you have maximum pain as a mother. You have really long contractions. I think it's like 90 seconds of pain with 30 seconds of rest in between. I didn't let that happen to me. I was so resistant to change that I wouldn't let my body go into transition. Just like I didn't let my life go into transition. So they had to actually give me an anesthesia before I would relax enough to endure transition. So I thought I would give you a few little tips on how to deal with your own life whenever transition happens. And this can be that you look in the mirror and you notice extra wrinkles and it's like, ooh, what fresh hell is this? Or it could be that you move. We just moved across the country. It could be that you've lost a loved one or that you've gotten a scary diagnosis. It could be something really, really scary. The same techniques work for everything, and it's pretty much the same as giving birth. First thing is, giving birth hurts like a mother, literally. But it hurts less if you know what it's doing and you're not afraid. And that's what the whole birthing class thing is about. They just teach you what to expect. And they say, this will hurt more than you can imagine. And you're like, ugh. I wanted to have the word epidural tattooed to my stomach. Small, but then as I got more pregnant, it would be larger. This did not go over well at my pre-birth classes because you're supposed to just man up and take it by breathing fast and hoping. But the point stands. It's a lot easier for women to go through labor if they know what's happening to them and they know how it works. Like when you get to transition, it's going to be really, really painful for 90 seconds and you'll get a 30-second break and okay. All right, so the first thing is expect it. Expect grief in times of transition. Know that every day is a potential time of transition. You'll get little grieving, you'll get bigger grieving. Know that it happens. And then if you don't repress it, like I repressed labor, if you relax into it, say, oh, I know what this is. It's gonna hurt a lot. I'm not going to like it. I'm going to get very angry. I'm going to get very sad, maybe both, maybe just one or the other. But it will pass. This is the present me giving birth to another version of me that will be more expansive, more understanding, more compassionate. This is going to be okay. It's not horrifying. It's exciting. In a way, something is being born. Another thing, this is so key, make time for it. If you have a major loss or major transformation, then not making time for it is like not making time to have a baby. I had a lunch date on the day my first child was born. And when I went into labor, I called her and I said, I can't make it to lunch. I'm in labor. And she said, how about dinner? She really did. There were all these beliefs that the idea that having babies is hard was just a sexist thing to repress women. I was like, no, actually, I probably will still be occupied at dinner time. So when I have a major transformation in my life, transition, if I lose a loved one or whatever, I actually schedule time, like an hour in the morning for a year, where I get to sit and allow grief to take me, allow the anger, allow the sorrow, allow crying, play sad music, lean into it, read sad books. My friend was right at lunch. They're cleansing, they're cathartic, but you must give it time. It is real work. Nothing is more real than the work of grief, and it deserves to be top priority, above taking care of your family, above your work. Give yourself time to grieve if something really significant has happened. And if something small has happened, give yourself a few minutes, for God's sake. Like give yourself time every day and just check for grieving and allow it. And then offer it as much love as you would offer to someone else who was grieving, right? Like the other night in New York, we heard from a Cambodian refugee who'd just been through the most atrocious horrors of war. And everyone in the audience, there was a little party afterwards, and everyone I talked to was like, I wish we could all just hug him at once. I wish we could just circle him like 500 people and just hug him until he felt better. That's what sorrow teaches us to do for other people's sorrow. Give it to yourself. And then just be patient and breathe through it until the birth occurs. And the birth will occur. It's not something you need to do. Labor lasts, a couple of days at the most. If you've moved across the country, it usually takes about a year. If you've lost a significant other, it could take up to 5 years. But don't worry, the first year is the hardest. And if you give it lots of time up front, like for me, this move has been, the grieving happened really quickly and it's not bad anymore. It's really not. And so I know that this works. Now, I have talked and talked because I'm nervous about the question part of this, because Ro's not here and I can barely see anything without these. Okay, all right. So if you would like to ask a question now, I love the fact that you're talking to each other. Here's something Anne-Marie says, and then somebody else asked her to write. She says, I'm writing a book and I feel a ton of resistance to the birthing it. Does writing books feel similar to giving birth to you? It actually really does. It's an interesting point because I was with a writer friend the other day and we were talking about how she felt about the publication of her book. And she had an intense fear response. And I'm all excited to coach her through it, right? We haven't really gotten there. But I think it's because she has an identity as someone who's sort of anonymous. Like, she doesn't go out in the world and have people come up and say, hey, I read your book. As good as something is, remember, even a prisoner getting out of prison has to go through the grieving process. So there are two things that happen to me with the book. One is that I'm the identity of someone who hasn't written the book yet. And there's a lot of fear about, oh, what if I can't do it right and all that. But then once you get writing, like my friend is, there's actually a grieving period that goes after you finish your book. I have another friend who wrote a beautiful book that's won prizes and everything. And I so identified with her right at the end of her writing, because it's like, you've been working, then it gets published, then it's out there. And then it's like, oh, I have to give up that book being the center of my life. I have to move on to a different book. And it's a change in ego. You have to include, but supersede who you were. So there is all this psychological resistance to becoming a different person. And the process of writing a book makes you a different person. The process of doing anything that big and significant makes you a different person. And so it doesn't seem all that rational, but follow these steps. Remember, expect it. Expect to grieve because you are writing a book. I know that sounds weird. Allow it. Don't repress it. Don't say this is stupid. Make time for the grieving part of it when you're not writing. Just like, oh, I've got to look at my resistance. And then breathe and hang loose until the birth starts to come. And if you work through the grief, a lot of that writer's block that people talk about is actually fear of change, fear of their own future, fear of what will happen if they start writing. So that's a really interesting question. I'm going to hide that one and look for another wondrous question. Okay, here's a good one. Ashley says, how do you address an underlying generalized grief that doesn't feel attached to a specific event or time? It feels like I tap into a collective grief, especially around sexism and misogyny that's rampant and so in your face at the moment. This is real. I'm really glad you asked that, because at one point I would have said, oh, you probably have some subconscious trauma, or you have, you're repressing the fear of death that everyone experiences. Or I would say two things now, though. One is, sometimes if we think we're lost in this world and we try to cut off from the idea that there's anything to us besides just a physical body, there can be a generalized grief that comes from forgetting what we may actually be, which we may actually be spiritual beings having a human experience. And for me, the memory, I've told you all about the white light experience I had when I was 28. And it was very, very convincing. I haven't doubted since then that there's a spiritual component to us. And if we deny that, it doesn't actually line up with the truth in our hearts. And so it can create this grief of having lost one's essential identity and destination and home. So that is one cause. The other one really may be a psychic thing. Like last week, we talked about people who have high empathy, high anxiety, are a little bit psychic. This experience absolutely convinced me. After Princess Diana died, I was like, oh my God, Princess Diana died. But I never had read an article about her. I didn't follow her in the news. She seemed like a lovely person. I just was not that interested. I walked through a room with a television on during her funeral. And I stopped as if I'd run into a glass door. I was hit by a wave of grief so intense. I felt like my heart melted into a puddle and fell out through my toes. And I sat down on the couch and I watched the funeral procession and sobbed. And it was real grief. And it wasn't mine. It was all the people who loved her so much. And the second the funeral was done and I went in the other room, it was totally gone. And I never felt it again. But man, was I riding a wave of grief. And when all this attention is focused on a given thing, like, Ashley mentioned all the isms that are being discussed so fervently on social media and whatnot at the moment. You tap into that. You tap into the emotional content from many, many people. While I was watching the TV, I felt the intensity of the grief of all the other, I don't know who it was, but I'm guessing it was all the people who were lining those streets that I was watching, and it was all the people who were tuning in on TV who loved Diana like a personal friend. I felt like I'd lost my best friend. It was strange. So one thing I would say is if that gets overwhelming, take a little break from it, because our own grief is plenty. We don't really need to be tapping into other sources of grief just because we happen to be a little psychic. It's good to be empathic with the world and to know that there's so much sadness out there, but don't torture yourself. It's not really necessary. Life will bring you plenty of your own suffering. Just find compassion for the other folks. Florence says, hi, Helen, and I could not agree more. All right, let's look for another question. Donna is, oh gosh, I cannot read that. This will be our last question. It looks like a big one. How do you deal with grief when anger seems to be so much louder than the grief? For example, years ago, after working as a principal for 12 years, I lost that role. My anger at the sexist and cruelty that surrounded the loss has seemed to keep me from grieving the loss and change. Aha! This is a great thing to end on, because a big part of the transformation that occurs with grief happens as birth happens by itself. You are pre-programmed to know how to become a different person. It hurts. It's pre-programmed that way. Don't know why. Seems to be part of growing the compassion that makes us not just different, but bigger somehow. But, I should have kept that question up, but I couldn't see my head. But here's the thing. There are parts of the grieving process that are meant to make you take action. For example, if you were to go into labor and you were out doing something, your body would want you to go be in a place where you would be undisturbed or helped by other people, where the temperature was right and there was a space to give birth. Animals, when they give birth, will make nests and so on. And you may have gone, if you've had a child, you may have gone through that burst of nesting instinct right before labor. Very interesting. I did that. But if I hadn't done it, it would have driven me crazy. Now, especially when the anger part comes in, we've talked about anger before, that anger is what we have to do. I'll repeat the quote I've used before. Our job, our task, is to transmute the anger that is affliction into the anger that is determination to bring about change. So when you hit the anger part, there's often a need to take action in the world to make the world different, as grieving has made you different. So when I finished grieving, for example, my son's diagnosis, when I finished grieving it, which took a few years, the anger parts about the way people were being told in schools across the world that their entire worth was based on their intellect, that hadn't gone away. And what I needed to do, what I could feel wanting to happen, another birth, was that I had to write about that so that I could take people on the same journey I'd been on, where I started thinking, oh my God, having a cognitive disability like Down syndrome was the worst thing that could happen. And I had to shatter that ego state and realize intellect, schmintellect, we're all this far from brain damage, and who cares? It's the heart and soul that make the most difference in the world. And, you know, if we're all rejecting the parts of ourselves that we think are stupid little children, we aren't living fully and we're not loving at all. So I needed to go out and make the change. So as grief changes you, and it will, you may be left with emotions later that try to channel you into, a lot of people go out and try to help other people in the same situation. Some people become activists, but wait until the change. Give yourself time to transcend who you were. Give your ego a chance to become something completely different. Wait until the birth has occurred and you've healed up, and then you go on to change the world and make it a better, bigger place, because now you'll be better and bigger and it won't hurt anymore. I promise. So to my friend out there who asked the question, give it a year and follow the steps. And to all of us who are in continuous change, let's keep just going into grief the way we go into giving birth, with courage and optimism and the knowledge that this is a transcendent experience and not just a hard one. I love you all so much. I wish I could give you a big hug, and I will have to do that when I see you in person. So until then, let's keep joining in the gathering room, and thank you so much for showing up. Mwah, 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 mwah.